I thought the most hurtful moment with my mother-in-law Galina was when she told relatives at a family gathering that I married up and should be grateful her son chose me despite my background. I was wrong. The most hurtful moment was sitting in a lawyer's office 6 months after I'd paid 5 million rubles from my inheritance to save her life, listening as she distributed her real estate holdings to family members. To my son Dmitry, the apartment on Leninsky Prospect. To my daughter Svetlana, the apartment on Pushkin Street. To my grandchildren, equal shares in the dacha. She went through the entire list methodically, 7 properties worth over 30 million rubles total, giving something meaningful to everyone. Everyone except me, the woman who'd liquidated her entire inheritance to pay for the experimental cancer treatment that saved Galina's life, when the rest of the family said they couldn't afford to help. When the lawyer finished reading and I sat there in stunned silence, Galina looked directly at me with a cold, satisfied smile and said, "You're not blood family, dear. These properties stay in the bloodline. Surely you understand." And in that moment, I finally understood with absolute clarity exactly how much my enormous sacrifice had meant to her. Nothing at all. My story began 4 years ago when I married Dmitry Volkov. I was 31, he was 34. I came from a modest middle-class background. My parents were both high school teachers who'd worked hard their entire lives, lived frugally, and never had significant wealth or property. Dmitry's family was considerably wealthier. His late father had been a successful businessman in the construction industry during the privatization era, leaving behind substantial real estate holdings worth tens of millions of rubles, all managed by his widow, Galina. From our very first meeting, Galina made it crystal clear I wasn't the daughter-in-law she'd envisioned or hoped for. She'd wanted Dmitry to marry Irina, the daughter of family friends who owned a manufacturing company, someone from their social circle with comparable wealth and business connections. "So your parents are both teachers," she'd said at our first meeting over tea at her spacious apartment, her tone making it sound like I'd said they were unemployed or beggars. "How quaint. And you work in marketing? At a small firm, not one of the major agencies?" Well, I suppose Dmitry has always been unconventional in his choices, ever since he was a child. The implication was painfully clear. I was a disappointing, unsuitable choice, someone beneath their family status who didn't belong in their world. Our wedding was tense and uncomfortable throughout. Galina wore white, not cream or ivory, but pure white, in what felt like a deliberate attempt to upstage me on my own wedding day. She gave a toast that ostensibly congratulated us, but was actually full of barbed comments about hoping Dmitry would find happiness despite unexpected choices, and how love sometimes makes us overlook practical considerations. She seated my parents at the furthest possible table from the head table, practically in another room, while her wealthy friends and distant relatives got all the prime spots near the family. She made comments throughout the reception about how she'd imagined Dmitry's wedding differently, how she'd hoped to see him married at the cathedral instead of our modest venue. But Dmitry loved me genuinely, and I tried hard to overlook his mother's coldness and casual cruelty, believing naively that she'd warm up over time, once she got to know me better and saw how much I loved her son and how happy we made each other. She didn't warm up, not even slightly. For 3 solid years, Galina found endless creative ways to remind me I didn't belong, that I was an outsider, tolerated only because her son had inexplicably chosen me. At family dinners, she'd discuss business matters and family finances in detail, then abruptly stop talking and change the subject the moment I entered the room. "Family business, dear. You wouldn't understand these matters," she'd say dismissively if I asked what they'd been discussing. She gave expensive, thoughtful gifts to Dmitry's sister Svetlana, designer handbags, jewelry, spa trips, while giving me token, obviously cheap presents like drugstore perfume or discount store scarves. She'd spend hours telling relatives stories about the family's history and success, their business achievements and social connections, then pointedly exclude me from family photos afterward. "Just blood family in this one," she'd say with a smile. When Dmitri and I bought our first apartment together, Galina never visited, claiming she was too busy. When Svetlana bought a house, Galina helped her decorate and visited weekly. The message was constant and clear. I was temporary, peripheral, not really part of the family, no matter what the marriage certificate said. Dmitri consistently defended her behavior and made excuses. "That's just her way. She's not good at expressing warmth. She's from a different generation, with different values. She does care about you. She just shows it differently than you're used to." But I saw absolutely no evidence of caring, only barely masked contempt and tolerance of my presence as an unfortunate necessity because her beloved son had married me. Then, 2 years ago, Galina was diagnosed with aggressive ovarian cancer. Stage 3, already significantly metastasized. The prognosis from her oncologist was grim. With standard chemotherapy and treatment protocols, she might have 2 years at absolute best, more likely 12 to 18 months. The cancer was advanced and aggressive. But her oncologist mentioned an experimental treatment program at a specialized private clinic in Munich, Germany. The treatment was showing remarkably promising results in clinical trials, with some patients achieving complete remission even at advanced stages. But it wasn't covered by any insurance and was enormously expensive. The total cost would be approximately 5 million rubles, including the treatment itself, expensive medications, multiple extended stays in Germany over several months, and follow-up care. The family gathered for an emergency meeting to discuss finances and options. Galina had properties worth over 30 million rubles on paper, but they were all rental income properties, generating steady cash flow. Selling any of them quickly would mean accepting significant losses, and they were the family's primary income source. Dmitri had savings of about 1 million rubles. His sister Svetlana claimed she was cash poor, despite her wealthy husband, saying all their money was tied up in business investments they couldn't liquidate quickly. Various aunts and uncles said they'd contribute small amounts, 10,000 here, 20,000 there, but no one had anything close to the bulk of money needed, and no one wanted to take out large loans. Galina looked absolutely devastated, tears streaming down her face. "So I'll just die because we can't come up with the money fast enough? After everything I've done for this family, all the sacrifices I made, and no one can help me now when I need it most?" Dmitri was desperate, frantically trying to figure out bank loans or emergency property sales or any possible solution. That's when I remembered my inheritance. My grandmother had died the previous year after a long illness, leaving me her apartment in her will. It was a modest 2-bedroom in an older Soviet-era building, but it was in a good central location with access to metro and amenities. I'd been planning to renovate it gradually and either rent it out for retirement income or keep it as a safety net for emergencies. When I'd had it professionally appraised for insurance purposes a few months earlier, the value came back at 5.2 million rubles. It was my only significant asset besides what Dmitri and I owned jointly. Exactly enough for Galina's treatment. I thought about it for 2 days, struggling with the decision. This was my only inheritance, my only substantial asset that was mine alone. My parents had been deeply upset when the will was read, and they got nothing. My grandmother had favored me specifically because I'd visited her weekly for years, while they'd rarely made time for her. She'd left the apartment to me as thanks for my devotion and care. This apartment represented my financial security, my independence, my grandmother's love and acknowledgement of my years of caring for her when no one else would. But Galina was Dmitri's mother. Saving her life would mean everything to him. And surely, if I made this enormous, life-changing sacrifice, giving up everything I had, Galina would finally accept me as real family, would finally see my worth and my love for her son, would finally treat me with the respect and warmth she showed blood relatives. I told Dmitri I could sell my grandmother's apartment to pay for his mother's treatment. He was completely overwhelmed with gratitude and relief, actually crying with emotion. "Are you absolutely sure? That's your inheritance, your only real financial security, independent of me. I can't ask you to do this. It's too much." I told him firmly that he wasn't asking, I was offering freely. Family helps family in times of crisis, right? That's what marriage means. When I told Galina directly that I was selling my grandmother's apartment to pay for her treatment in Germany, I expected gratitude, maybe even tears or an emotional acknowledgement of the sacrifice I was making. Some recognition that I was giving up everything I had to save her life. Instead, she nodded briskly and matter-of-factly. Well, it's fortunate the apartment is worth something useful at least. Make sure you get the best possible price, but work quickly. We can't waste time with the cancer progressing. Time is critical. No thank you. No acknowledgement of what I was giving up or what it meant. Just practical instruction about executing the sale efficiently. I sold the apartment within 3 weeks through a realtor who specialized in quick sales, getting 4.9 million rubles, slightly below the appraisal value because of the urgency and need for immediate cash payment. Combined with Dimitri's 1 million in savings and small contributions from various relatives, totaling about 200,000, we had enough. Galina went to Germany immediately, underwent the experimental treatment protocol over 4 intense months of multiple trips back and forth, and miraculously, against odds, it worked. After a year of follow-up treatments and careful monitoring, she was declared in complete remission. The doctors called it remarkable, a best-case outcome that exceeded their hopes. Throughout her entire treatment and recovery process, I kept expecting some acknowledgement of my sacrifice, a heartfelt thank you, a meaningful gesture of appreciation, an acceptance into the family as someone who'd proven my love and commitment beyond any doubt. Instead, Galina treated the entire thing as if I'd simply paid a bill that was due, an obligation or expected contribution, rather than an enormous personal sacrifice. At a big family dinner celebrating her recovery and return to health, she made an emotional speech thanking the doctors for their skill, thanking God and fate for giving her more time, thanking her late husband's spirit for watching over her from heaven. She thanked Dimitri extensively for his support and love during her ordeal. She thanked Svetlana for visiting her in Germany. She didn't mention me even once. When I pointed this out to Dimitri later that night, hurt and confused, he made his usual excuses. She's overwhelmed emotionally. She's still processing everything and recovering. She absolutely knows what you did, even if she doesn't express appreciation well verbally. Give her time. But I was starting to realize with growing clarity that she simply didn't value my contribution because it came from me, the outsider, the woman who wasn't worthy of her son. 6 months after being declared completely cancer-free, Galina called a formal family meeting. I've been thinking seriously about my mortality, she announced to everyone gathered. The cancer experience reminded me we never know how much time we have left. I want to organize my affairs properly while I'm healthy, make sure my estate is distributed according to my wishes, avoid any confusion or conflict after I'm gone. She'd arranged for the family lawyer to meet with everyone to go through her will and property distribution plan in detail. I assumed this meeting would finally be the acknowledgement I'd been waiting for patiently. Surely after I'd saved her life with my entire inheritance, everything I had, she'd show some appreciation, some recognition of my place in the family and what I'd done. Maybe she'd gift me one of the smaller properties, or at least mention my contribution publicly so the entire family would understand what I'd sacrificed for her. We all gathered in the lawyer's office on a Tuesday afternoon: Galina, Dimitri, Svetlana and her husband, and me. The lawyer, an older man who'd apparently handled family business for decades, began reading through Galina's updated will and comprehensive property distribution plan. She was setting up a living trust, distributing properties now rather than waiting for death, to avoid inheritance taxes and legal complications. To my son, Dmitry Volkov, I gift the 3-bedroom apartment on the Ninsky Prospect, valued at approximately 6 million rubles. Dmitry looked surprised, but genuinely pleased. It was a beautiful property in an excellent location with modern renovations. To my daughter, Svetlana Volkova, I gift the 2-bedroom apartment on Pushkin Street, valued at approximately 5 million rubles, as well as the commercial property on Nevsky Avenue, currently leased to retail tenants, valued at approximately 8 million rubles. Svetlana looked absolutely delighted. 13 million in properties total. To my grandchildren Alexei and Marina, equally, I gift the family dacha property to be held in trust until they reach age 25, at which point ownership transfers to them jointly. This was the country house, worth about 3 million, that the family had used for summers for decades. The lawyer continued methodically through the list. A studio apartment worth 1.8 million to her sister, a small commercial space to her brother, another apartment to a cousin, even a studio apartment worth about 1 million to a nephew who'd visited Galina maybe twice in 10 years. 7 properties total, worth collectively over 30 million rubles, distributed among various family members. I sat there waiting for my name, for the acknowledgement, for something, anything. The lawyer finished reading the document, looked up from his papers, and said formally, "That completes the property distribution schedule as outlined in the trust documents." Complete silence in the room. Everyone glanced uncomfortably at me. I looked directly at Galina, waiting for her to correct the obvious omission, to tell the lawyer there was one more item he'd forgotten to read, that there'd been a mistake in the paperwork. Instead, Galina met my eyes directly, with an expression that was cold, satisfied, and completely deliberate. She said clearly, making sure everyone heard, "You're not blood family, dear. These properties stay in the bloodline, with real family. Surely you understand. They're our family legacy, the Volkov family inheritance, built by my late husband, not for outsiders who married in." The room went absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Svetlana looked uncomfortable and avoided eye contact. Her husband stared at the floor. Dmitri's face went completely pale and then flushed red. I sat there feeling like I'd been physically slapped across the face, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. "Mother," Dmitri started, his voice tight and controlled with obvious effort. "Elena sold her entire inheritance to pay for your treatment. 5 million rubles. Everything she had. The treatment that saved your life when the rest of us couldn't help." Galina waved a dismissive hand like she was brushing away something insignificant. "Yes, and we're grateful, of course. It was appreciated. But that was a gift between family members, a generous gesture to help in a time of need. It doesn't entitle her to our family properties that have been in the Volkov family for decades. These apartments are the family legacy, built by my late husband through his hard work. They stay with blood relatives, with real family. Elena should be happy she could help save my life, not expect repayment or compensation like some kind of business transaction." "I'm not expecting repayment," I heard myself say, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears, like someone else was speaking. I expected acknowledgement, recognition, basic gratitude, some indication that my sacrifice actually mattered, that I'm actually part of this family I've been desperately trying to belong to for 4 years. Galina's expression didn't soften even slightly. Her eyes were hard. "You married into the family, dear. You weren't born into it. There's a fundamental difference, a very significant one. You've been given the privilege of carrying the Volkov name through marriage. That should be quite enough." I looked at Dmitri desperately, waiting for him to say something strong, to defend me properly, to demand his mother show basic human decency and gratitude. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked back and forth between his mother and me, clearly torn between us. "Mother, this isn't right or fair. Elena gave up everything she had for you, her only inheritance." "And I said I'm appreciative," Galina said dismissively, as if explaining something to a slow child. "But appreciation doesn't mean giving away valuable family properties to non-blood relatives just because they helped out during a crisis. These properties are for my children and grandchildren, for the continuation of the family. Now, I believe this meeting is concluded." She stood up, gathering her handbag, clearly considering the matter completely closed and not open for further discussion. I stood up too, but instead of leaving quietly like she expected, I looked directly at Galina and spoke clearly. "You're absolutely right about one thing. I'm not blood family. I married into this family, naively thinking that love and commitment and sacrifice would make me actually belong. I was completely wrong. But you should know something. That apartment I sold to save your life? That was my only inheritance, my only significant asset. My grandmother left it specifically to me, not to my parents or anyone else, because I spent 5 years visiting her every single week, caring for her, keeping her company when she was lonely and sick and everyone else was too busy. It represented her love for me and my financial security. I gave it up entirely, thinking family helps family in crisis, thinking you'd finally accept me and see I was worthy. I turned to look at Dmitry. I can't stay in a family where a 5 million ruble sacrifice to literally save someone's life is dismissed as just a generous gesture that doesn't even merit a public thank you or basic acknowledgement, where I'll always be an outsider, no matter what I do or give or sacrifice. I'm filing for divorce. The shock on everyone's faces was absolute and total. Dmitry looked completely devastated. Elena, please, don't make a major life decision like this right now when you're understandably upset and emotional. We can work this out. We can fix this. Work exactly what out? I asked, my voice eerily calm now. Your mother just made it explicitly, publicly clear that I'll never be real family no matter what I do. And you didn't even defend me properly. You've spent 4 years asking me to overlook her coldness, making excuses for her behavior, telling me she'll warm up eventually. She just distributed 30 million in properties to everyone, including a nephew who barely knows her, while deliberately excluding the person who saved her life. And you think we can work this out? I walked out of that lawyer's office and went straight to a divorce attorney that same afternoon, filed papers the following week. The divorce was brutal and ugly. Galina actively encouraged Dmitry to fight me on every single asset, to give me as little as possible. After 6 months of legal battles and fees, I walked away with half our marital assets, about 2 million rubles plus my car. Nothing even close to what I'd sacrificed. During the divorce proceedings, the full extent of Galina's long-term manipulation became painfully clear. She'd been encouraging Dmitry for years to keep finances separate from me, to maintain emotional distance, to not give me too much influence in family business matters or decisions. She'd been systematically ensuring I could never actually integrate into the family, keeping me perpetually on the outside looking in, making sure I'd never have real power or belonging. The divorce finalized 8 months after that lawyer's office meeting. I used my settlement to buy a small one-bedroom apartment, nothing like my grandmother's place but mine. Started rebuilding my life, piece by piece. Last I heard through mutual friends, Dmitry realized far too late what he'd lost by not standing up to his mother, by choosing her over his wife repeatedly. He tried to contact me several times over the following year, sending long, apologetic emails and messages saying he should have defended me, that he finally saw clearly how toxic and manipulative his mother had always been, that he wanted another chance. But it was too late. The damage was irreparable. Galina lived another 1.5 years in perfect health, enjoying her properties and her family, before dying suddenly of a massive heart attack. I felt absolutely nothing when I heard the news. The woman I'd saved with everything I had was the same woman who'd made brutally clear I'd never be worthy of basic gratitude or family inclusion, no matter what I sacrificed. The cruelest irony that haunts me sometimes is that if I'd kept my grandmother's apartment instead of selling it to save Galina, I'd have significant financial security now. The property values in that area have increased. It would be worth nearly 7 million today. Instead, I gave 5 million to save the life of someone who saw it as merely adequate payment for the privilege of marrying her son, who believed I should be grateful for the opportunity to sacrifice everything for her. I learned an expensive, painful lesson. You can't buy belonging or love or acceptance, especially from people who've already decided you're not worthy. And sacrifice without basic respect or appreciation isn't noble or admirable. It's just self-destruction. Real family doesn't keep score about who's blood and who isn't. Real family values people for their actions and love, not their DNA. I've rebuilt my life completely without the Volkov family. Got promoted twice at work, bought a better apartment last year, reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while desperately trying to gain Galina's approval. I'm in a serious relationship now with someone who values me for exactly who I am, whose family welcomed me immediately with warmth, who would never let anyone treat me as less than. And I'll never again sacrifice my financial security and independence, hoping for acceptance from people who've already decided I'm not worthy. That's the real gift Galina finally gave me. Absolute clarity that I needed to leave that family and never look back. I paid 5 million rubles to save my mother-in-law's life with everything I had. She gifted apartments worth 30 million to everyone except me. And in doing so, she inadvertently gave me something valuable, the absolute clarity and strength I needed to leave that family and build a better life without them.